The other day I stopped by Lowe's and I picked up some of these containers. This is what they look like. They're from the brand Ready Refill, Gardening Made Easy, and it says pick your plant, pick your planter, drop in. And this one is a 6-pack. It does come with punch out drainage holes that you can just use, but I just use my drill. I feel like it's just a lot faster, and I drill about 4 inside of every single container. And these I have around the perimeter of Serendipity because I like using them to grow all kinds of stuff. Last year I planted a bunch of peppers and an eggplant in these, and they worked really well. But some of you guys gave me the advice to plant my peppers a little bit closer together so that their hands, I think so that they can hold hands or something like that, so that their hands touch, something like that. I had them spaced out a little bit apart just so that I could sweep in between them, but they're so light that I can always just pull them out and sweep behind them if I need to. And so I picked up 12 of them. They come in a 6-pack for about $34. You can probably find other ones that are a little bit more inexpensive, but I liked these just because of the design of them. They look like mini wine barrels, and that's what I like because I have a bunch of other resin containers that look like barrels too. So I think what I'm going to do first is just drill all the holes, and then all of the clippings from the trees that I took today, I'm going to chop them down a little bit finer, and I'm going to start filling these with them. The reason I do that is so that I don't have to use quite as much soil. I could still just fill the whole thing up with soil, but 12 of these is going to take quite a bit. Plus, I want to start building the life of the soil. So it doesn't matter what size of container I use. I always like to add organic matter, a little bit of soil, and then I keep layering it over the years. And then that way the soil in there goes from just regular potting mix to living soil that doesn't need a whole lot from me anymore. Something else that I do is every once in a while throughout the year I come out here with handfuls of worms, and I put them in every single part of my garden, including the small containers. So I'll just take a handful and then plop them on top. I used to bury them, but I figured the worms could just do that themselves. Like plop them on top, and they don't like the sun very much, so they'll start burrowing in, and they'll start eating up all of the decaying organic matter that I've placed in there. So anyways, I just wanted to show you them. Oh, and you know what? I also picked up something else from Lowe's. Okay, let me show you real quick. These I'm super excited about. I picked up 5 more citrus trees. Okay. And I know what you're probably thinking. How the heck do I have space for any more trees? And trust me, there's always room. All I have to do is just keep them pruned to size. I already have the containers in the garden, 25-gallon containers that have been sitting there empty, and I think citrus trees are the perfect thing to plant in there because they grow so well here in the low desert. But this is the size of tree that I will buy if I find the variety in this size tree versus the 5-gallon containers. And there's a few reasons for that. The main one, okay, so I was at Lowe's the other day, and usually I don't even glance at the citrus anymore because I have so much in the garden that I just don't feel like I need any more. But I went with my kids, and oh my gosh, they talked me into it. Okay, they know I have no self-control when it comes to trees. I usually go for the trees inside of the small tree pots versus the 5-gallon, 10-gallon, whatever other size, because these are always going to be the most inexpensive. And that's how I've been able to purchase so many trees for the garden, is I would always buy the cheapest, smallest tree. The size doesn't matter to me when I first purchase it. What does matter to me is the shape of the graft and whether it's in good condition or not. And then just how the little tree looks overall. I don't care if it's not very tall. It's just, does it look healthy or not? Does it look like, does it look like it's in good shape? And if it is, then I usually just go for those trees over the bigger ones, because the way I look at it is these trees are still babies, and if I plant them out into serendipity, wherever I plant them, they're going to become accustomed to those growing conditions. And I feel like usually they're a lot more vigorous than the trees that I buy that are bigger but sometimes they're so used to the growing conditions that they were in previously that when I bring them here to Serendipity, sometimes they've been shipped from other places too. So when I place them in Serendipity, I feel like it takes them longer to acclimate because they're so used to other growing conditions. The other reason is that sometimes I would buy the 5-gallon containers and 95% of the whole container would be soil, and the trees would still be this size and the roots would still be this size, and sometimes in this exact shape of the little tree pots. So I don't even go for those anymore. I feel like I don't need that. I've had trees that I planted at the same time, some in 5-gallon containers, some in these size containers, and the ones in these containers grew faster than the ones in the other containers, than the ones in the 5 gallons, and sometimes they even just they grew faster, they were more vigorous, and for some of them they just grew at the same time. Like, you can't even tell a difference even though they came from very different size containers. Okay, so these right now they're selling them for $23.98, $24. That's not bad, but when I first started gardening 3 years ago, I was able to find these for $10, $12. If it was a variety that was a little bit like fancier, maybe $15, if that. And then last year I noticed they had gone up to $20, $19.99, and now this year they're at $24, $25. How much is it? $23.98. So now they're up to $24, which is insane because a lot of my other trees, the ones that I would buy in 5 gallons, those used to go for like $26.99, $27.99, and now those are like $35, $36 and up. So anyways, the varieties that I got for these, oh, by the way, I think all of these are semi-dwarf. Semi-dwarf, right? These, does it say? Okay, and a lot of these are semi-dwarfs. Not all of my citrus is semi-dwarf though. Some of them are just standard size trees. I don't really look for semi-dwarfs even though I'm planting them in containers. When I first started gardening, I was looking everywhere for dwarf and semi-dwarf trees, but now I just figure I'll just keep them pruned to size. So I picked up a thornless Mexican lime. I already have a Eureka pink variegated lemon tree, an improved Meyer lemon tree, and a bear's lime, but we eat so much lemon that I figured one more couldn't hurt. Plus I don't have this variety. Next up is a clementine, and I do have a clementine, but it was one of the original trees that I planted in the garden, and because of that I still have not gotten fruit, and the tree is definitely looking a lot healthier, but it's been in recovery mode for many years. So I just wanted to experiment a little bit and see how well this one would perform compared to it. Like, do clementine trees take a little bit longer to fruit and I just need to wait, or is that one a little bit more stunted because I planted it so deep, and is that why it hasn't fruited? So I want to see how long it takes this one to fruit now that you can see what a baby it is when I'm first planting it. And it's so cute. Look at it. The only thing I will do is like take off any bottom shoots. Next up is a Murcott semi-dwarf Mandarin. And I think the mandarins that I have in the garden right now is the clementine, and then I have an Owari Satsuma Mandarin, and I think that's it. I don't have very many, so I figured I'd just pick another one up and I'd see how well it could grow in the garden. Plus I just want to try it. So there's that one. Next up is the navel orange. This is one that you can find at any grocery store, and usually I try to grow varieties that are a little bit more fancy-ish. But this one I wanted to try just because one of my kids chose it, and I kept asking them, are you sure you don't want another tree, a fancier tree? And they were like, no, I want the navel orange. So I'm gonna plant it for them. The navel orange is for you. The last one is a Dancy semi-dwarf tangerine. And then this one, another one of my babies chose, so I figured I'd give it a go and see what it tastes like. I think that's one of my favorite things about gardening, is being able to grow plants for my family, like plants that remind me of them. Like the mango tree, I grew it for my son. He really wanted a mango tree. The bananas I grew for my husband. The avocado trees for my son. The apple trees for one of my daughters. All the peach trees for my other daughter. They inspired me to plant those trees. So anyways, these are all the citrus that I picked up. In total, I should have, I think, like 14 citrus after I plant these, which is a lot of citrus, but I have no doubt my kids will go through it like it's water. Okay, anywho, next I'm going to start drilling holes into these containers so that I can fill them with the clippings and the garden won't get so messy. So let me go get my drill bit. I need to bring my extension cord out here. I have my drill. And then this is the drill bit that I like to use. It's 5/8, because it says 5/8 on it. And this is the shape. It makes a hole. I feel like it makes pretty good size holes. And I just bought a packet of these that come in different sizes. And I like to use them for my containers to drill drainage holes. So I'm just gonna So I flip these guys upside down and then I start drilling. The reason I'm adding this into my garden is because I want to be able to add more of that cottage fairy tale aesthetic. So for that reason, I decided to invest a little bit more money into purchasing these containers because I like the style of them. I'm trying to add a couple more wood tones into the garden. I feel like it's gonna help me maintain that cottage fairy look or aesthetic that I'm going for. And I'm adding this to the perimeter of the Heart of Serendipity because a really long time ago, I actually used to have some planters that I made. I went to Lowe's, I picked up a bunch of cedar fence pickets, and I created these super long planters. And I don't think I really documented any of the process, or if I did, I must have deleted the files because it took me forever. I remember building them in the heat of summer. I would try and go outside and sit underneath arch rose clare for hours, cutting these down to size, trying to figure out exactly how big I was gonna make them, all while not knowing how to use any power tools. And even though it took me a while, I definitely lost my sanity a couple of times. I loved working on that project because by using those type of DIY planters, I guess you could say, I was able to grow more food in my small backyard. And one thing I really liked about them was being able to have plants cover up the cinder block wall, because I've mentioned that before, that cinder block wall drives me nuts. I feel like it's so ugly, so I like to try and make it look more beautiful by just covering it up with plants. So anyways, ultimately I wound up getting rid of all of those long planters because they were so long that there was no way for me to move them, especially once they were filled with soil, which meant that unfortunately, once rats found serendipity, they started nesting behind them. So I just got rid of all of them, and it was such a huge process. I documented it. It's always gonna stick with me because it drove me nuts, especially because I knew how long I had worked on these planters. And for a while there, I had nothing growing up against the cinder block walls anymore. And I guess the positives to that is that I had a little bit more space to be able to walk through more easily. But I feel like in the end, I wasn't happier. I still miss being able to grow more food and be able to make the most use out of every single little inch of space. And so I'm excited to add these planters. And the reason I also went with these is because I can always clean behind them. I can just pick them up. They're very, very small. They're very light. I can grow maybe some smaller vegetables in them, but I can also just see how things perform in them. They'll be set up on drip. And this way, if a rat ever enters my garden again, I can just quickly move the container and make sure that nothing can nest behind it. So we'll see how they work out. I already moved some of these just to check to see how many I needed, but I'm basically filling in all the gaps so that the containers are right up against each other. And I like the way it looks. Once they're all full, I think it's gonna look really beautiful. I also need to come through and just pull out any weeds. I don't have the irrigation set up to them yet, but what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add little barbed tees to some of the containers, and then I'm just gonna add irrigation. I ran out of drip line, so I ordered some more from Drip Depot, and they already shipped. I ordered it last week and it shipped out the exact same day. At least that's what my email said, so I'm so excited. That was really fast. It should get here, if not today, maybe tomorrow. But okay, I'm gonna start laying them out. One extra now. Shoot. All right, that gives me so much more space to plant in. Now that I have my containers placed where I want them, I need to start filling them. So I'm gonna spend the rest of the day just walking around the garden, pruning anything that needs to go. That way I can start filling them with a lot of organic matter. First, I'm gonna bring over my clippings. Okay, here's the first container. All I'm gonna do is just chop these up into smaller pieces so that I can fill most of the bottom. I want my container, even though the container is small, I want about half of it to be clippings and the other half of it to be soil. By the end of the year, it'll go down several inches from the top because all the clippings will start to break down, and then I'll just top it with a little bit more soil, compost, and then other yard clippings too. So here's the thing, I made a mistake during this part because I was a little bit distracted with trying to film. I was tired, but I was also worried that my gremlins would come into frame, and I happened to make a pretty simple but pretty big mistake, and that was to immediately start filling the bottom up with all of my organic matter, all of my kitchen scraps and garden cuttings and all of that. I think it would have been a much better idea to put some soil at the bottom and then go ahead and put the kitchen scraps and then layer some more soil. That way, all of that is sandwiched in between layers of soil. And then that way, whenever I add my red wriggler worms, I won't get any of the drainage holes clogged up, which is actually what happened with one of these containers. I think it had a lot to do with how things were breaking down over time. And because I had put all of these big chunks of organic matter at the bottom, as they were breaking down, they literally clogged up all of the drainage holes, and for a while there, this container was not draining at all. And when I finally went in to inspect it, it had gone anaerobic and it smelled so disgusting. And I believe in total, I had this happen with 2 containers. I think it's, and now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure it's the ones that I filled up on this day, because after that with the rest of them, I went about it on a normal day where I was just working on gardening and not gardening and talking and watching my gremlins. And so the other ones were fine. But for these, I just want to point that out, that I should have added a layer of soil at the bottom and then some of the garden clippings and then soil again. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And then any other foliage. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think I could still add a little bit more, but I don't have a whole lot of prunings right now that I need to get rid of. Okay, I found a few more. I found some papaya. This is what the container looks like so far. It's about halfway, a little bit less than halfway full of clippings. I put some old cauliflower plants in there, some papaya, some pieces of a papaya plant, and then the guava. So next I'm just gonna fill it up with soil, and then that container is ready to go. Let me go get the soil. So this time around, I'm going to be using a little bit of this one. It's one that my brother gave me. Let me see. At first, I thought it was just cocoa core, but it's actually not. Royal Gold. Duper. High porosity container mix for indoor, outdoor, and greenhouse use. It is to pour. So I'm going to use a little bit of this, and then the rest of it is just going to be compost or composted manure. Okay. I'm only gonna do one container, and I think I'm gonna stop for today because my babies are out here and I want to garden with them a little bit as well. This is gonna be the good stuff. You know what I've also experimented with that did work for me as well is just doing layers of organic matter and then compost, and that's it. Organic matter and compost over and over again also seem to work really well for me. Okay, I'm going to top off the rest of the container with some composted manure, but you can also just use mushroom compost. I just purchased whatever I can find at Lowe's, and for some reason sometimes they have mushroom compost and sometimes they don't. And because these containers are a lot more new compared to the garden beds and some of my bigger containers, what I'll do right before I plant is add a little bit of fertilizer as my worm castings, and I'll also drop in a few worms in there, and that'll get them started. And then over the next few years I'll just continue building the soil life in these small containers. So that's it for today. I'm just gonna pop this one back into its place. And I just want to thank you for joining me in gardening today. I still have a lot to do, but I'm going to work on that with my little gremlins. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.